How are the Vikings linked to the modern devices? The most important facts about Vikings in just 10 minutes. Study with Ruslana.
Ruslana, science!
Who were the Vikings and why have they received so much fame? In our modern world, Vikings have definitely taken their spotlight. There are plenty of movies and series featuring Vikings. Football fans dress up in their style, and Thor, a mythological Scandinavian hero, is one of the main characters in Marvel. When we think of Vikings, most of us will see this image in our heads. But in reality, archaeological findings prove that Vikings never wore horned helmets. Instead, they were traders, explorers, warriors, and traders coming from an area known as Scandinavia, which is modern-day Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. The Vikings spoke different dialects of the Old Norse, which was a common ancestor of the Swedish, Danish, and Icelandic folk. The Vikings' writing system did not have an alphabet, but rather a set of magical characters called runes. Viking thinking was pagan, and runes were not only used as a tool for writing, but as decorations on tools and amulets. The word Viking comes from the Old Norse of Vikingur, which translates as people who go out to sea. So why did they become raiders and explorers? The climate and nature in Scandinavia are cold and harsh, therefore agriculture was difficult and they lacked crops. In the 8th century, the development of Scandinavia lagged far behind Europe. They could not mint coins, led a simple lifestyle, and they had no state. The combination of all these conditions pushed Vikings beyond their borders to conquer their wealth and obtain their notoriety and glory. So what made it possible for them to raid overseas lands? The Vikings may have had a fierce reputation, but they were more than just brutal warriors. They were champion shipbuilders, and their ships could travel fastly and safely across the roughest seas. They were bold explorers and reached the Americas 500 years before Christopher Columbus did. The Viking ships were called dracars. Why? Because they were decorated with a car dragon's head at the bow of the ship. It was believed that they kept evil spirits away. The ships were able to go forward with its nose and back with its stern. They had the best mobility of all time, and they were also a little draft, allowing navigation in very shallow waters. The invention of such a vessel was like the invention of the spaceship in the 20th century. The sight of a dragon-headed and red-striped sailed ship would strike fear into the hearts of the Europeans for 300 years. Sagas are Scandinavian poetic tales about gods and heroes, travel and battles. On long winter evenings, people gathered at the hearth and listened to the scouts as they told their sagas. There was no YouTube or Netflix back then, so a good scout was just as valued as a brave warrior. Now I'm your scout, so let's continue our saga about the Vikings. The world was a scary and dangerous place, so even people as tough as Vikings believed in supernatural beings to make sense of nature. In the Viking view, the universe was arranged in a huge-ass tree, like an axe piercing and uniting three spheres, with the lower world of the dead, the terrestrial life, and the heaven. The greatest reward for a Viking was to enter the Valhalla after their death, which was only possible for brave warriors who died in battle. Valhalla is a chamber where warriors and gods feasted endlessly, and they listened to the scouts telling sagas. The main god they worshipped was Wotan, and his helpers Valkyries helped him bring the warriors to Valhalla. And one of the main gods was Thor. No, not the Marvel character. He was the son of Wotan, and Thursday is named after him. So let's journey through the Viking timeline. Let's see how Europe was at that time. In the beginning of the 9th century, Europe had three strong states: the Franks, modern-day Belgium, Germany, and France; Byzantine, Turkey and Greece; and the Arabic Al-Andalus, Spain and Portugal. The beginning of the Viking expansion is considered to be in 793, when on 3 ships they looted and captured a monastery in northeast England. The Vikings returned back to Scandinavia made a sensation, and their fame spread from fjord to fjord. They had invented a new lucrative business. They could sail to shore, slaughter everyone, fill their ships with weighted good, set on fire everything that they couldn't hold, and disappear before the coastal inhabitants gathered with their strength. In 795, the Vikings invaded Ireland for the first time. Then they raided France. While in 814, the Frankish state disintegrates as the Karl Magna dies, and the Vikings used it as their opportunity, and they increased their trades around Europe. In 830, they already reached Lisbon, which is in present-day Portugal. In 845, Ragnar Leatherpants burns Paris. And in 860, they already reached Constantinople. Just think about it. This is in the opposite part of Europe from where Scandinavia is. The Vikings were strong and powerful, and only the Arabic emir of Cordoba, present-day Spain, managed to defeat a large Viking army. Before, they used to go back home for the winter, but then they decided to colonize the lands. They attacked the places all over the coast of England, Scotland, Ireland, France, Italy, and inland Russia. They terrorized, traded, explored, and finally settled into the lands they encountered. They went from raids to conquest, from robbery to settlements. In 867, a huge army of Viking ships arrived in the coast of England, and after a few years, they enforced the Danish law and culture. This area then became known as Danelaw. As a result, philologists count thousands of words in the English language that were borrowed from the Old Norse, the Viking language. For example, window, the eye to the wind. Meanwhile, in France, Roland pedestrians troops. Roland was so heavy that no horse could carry him, and he had to walk. They surrounded Paris, received a huge ransom, and gained an entire area in the north of France that would be called Normandy. After decades of traveling and settlement, the Vikings were influenced of the cultures of who have they conquered and converted from paganism to Christianity. However, the Vikings did not extend to Europe only, but far beyond as well. Under the lead of Leif Erikson, the son of Eric the Red, the Vikings have reached Labrador and Newfoundland in Canada. But they have not received the fame of discovering the new continent, as they have not established themselves there. And even Christopher Columbus will only discover it 5 centuries later. They began to establish new states in eastern England, northern France, Novgorod, and Sicily. The Vikings have not only reached the west, but also explored the east. They have learned how to navigate on rivers and know how to go from Scandinavia to Constantinople. And they have even reached Khwarezm, which is in modern-day Uzbekistan, to participate in the Silk Road trading. The final date of the Vikings happened in 1066, when Harold Hardrade tried to seize the throne in England and died in the Battle of Stamford Bridge. And it is important to note down that a few months later, that same year, William the Conqueror, who came from France, conquered England and became its king. But the truth is that he was a descendant of Rollo the Pedestrian, the same one who besieged Paris. So the Vikings in 3 centuries went from robbers to kings and dukes. They intertwined with the Irish and the Slavs, the English and the Franks. The Vikings have dissolved in them. They have changed the European people. They have forged new states, new destinies, and a new course of history. The Viking Age entered the historical timeline in the 8th century. It lasted only about 300 years, but it was a bright flash, full of rich and historical events that will leave a huge footprint in the European history. So who the Vikings really were? Are they heroes or bandits? Turns out they're all together. Maybe that's why they become so legendary and popular. So is it true that our devices are actually linked to the fierce warriors in the past? If you look at the Bluetooth logo, you will see 2 runes that symbolize Harold Bluetooth. He was the ruler and brought Christianity to Denmark, and he united rival tribes. So when Danish and Swedish engineers in the 20th century invented a new system which connects 2 devices together, they named it after Harold Bluetooth. So next time when you're using wireless headphones, please remember that Viking.